Have you ever wondered how far someone would go to hold on to their youth, to defy time itself? Most people dream of a fountain of youth, a magical spring that can turn back the clock. But what if the price of that fountain wasn't water? What if it was something much, much darker? Tonight, we delve into the chilling tale of a woman whose name has become a whisper in the darkest corners of history, a countess of immense wealth and power, who is said to have believed that the secret to eternal beauty was hidden in the lifeblood of others. This is the story of Countess Elizabeth Báthory, the noblewoman who would become known to legend as the Blood Countess. It's a tale of vanity, power, and a nightmare that unfolded behind the stone walls of a remote castle, leaving a legacy of terror that has lasted for over 400 years. To understand the monster, we must first understand the woman. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful and distinguished noble families in the Kingdom of Hungary. The Bathory family wasn't just rich. They were royalty in all but name. They were princes, cardinals, and warlords. They were also eccentric. Stories of cruelty, strange behavior, and a certain darkness seemed to follow the family name. Elizabeth grew up in this world of immense privilege and whispered scandal. She was not just a noblewoman. She was exceptionally intelligent. By her teenage years, she was fluent in Latin, German, and Greek, a level of education unheard of for most women of her time. She was sharp, she was powerful, and she was destined for a great marriage. At the young age of 15, she was married to Count Ferenc Nadasdy, another formidable figure from a powerful Hungarian family. Ferenc was a soldier, a celebrated war hero known as the Black Hero of Hungary for his bravery and ruthlessness in battle against the Ottoman Empire. His life was the battlefield, which meant for long stretches of time, Elizabeth was left alone. She was the sole mistress of their many estates, including the grim and imposing Čachtice Castle, perched on a hill in what is now Slovakia. While her husband was away fighting wars, Elizabeth was in charge of everything: the lands, the finances, the staff, and the hundreds of villagers who lived and worked under her rule. She held the power of life and death over them, and in the isolation of her castle, with no one to answer to, the whispers began. At first, they were small. Stories of a servant girl punished too harshly for a minor mistake, a maid who was struck with such force that she collapsed. But these were dismissed. In the 16th century, nobles had absolute authority over their servants. Cruelty was common, and the lives of peasants were considered cheap. But with Elizabeth, the stories were different. They spoke of a cold, calculated rage, a personal enjoyment in inflicting pain that went far beyond simple discipline. The years passed. Elizabeth and Ferenc had several children, and on the surface, they were the picture of a powerful, noble family. But behind the castle walls, a dark cabal was forming around the countess. Her inner circle included her old nurse, Ilona Yo, a woman some called a witch, a major domo named Janos Wivari, known as Fico, and other loyal servants who would do anything their mistress asked, no matter how depraved. They were her enablers, the hands that would help carry out the horrors to come. Then, in 1604, everything changed. Ferenc Nadasdy, the Black Hero of Hungary, died. Some say it was from battle wounds, others from a sudden illness. Whatever the cause, at the age of 44, Elizabeth Báthory was a widow. Now she was not just powerful, she was untouchable. She inherited all of her husband's vast wealth and estates, making her one of the richest women in all of Hungary. She had no husband to answer to, no one to rein in her darkest impulses. The last restraint was gone, and the nightmare of Čachtice Castle was about to begin in earnest. This is where the legend truly takes hold. The story goes that one day, a young servant girl was combing Elizabeth's hair and accidentally pulled it. Elizabeth flew into a rage and slapped the girl across the face, so hard that her own hand was splattered with the girl's blood. When she wiped it away, she supposedly noticed something remarkable. The skin where the blood had been seemed smoother, younger, more radiant. In that moment, a twisted obsession was born. If a few drops of blood could do that, what could a bath in it achieve? This was the beginning of a systematic hunt. At first, the victims were local peasant girls, daughters of farmers who lived on her lands. They were lured to the castle with promises of good work as maids or servants. It was an opportunity their families couldn't refuse, a chance for a better life. But once they passed through the castle gates, they were never seen again. Their parents would ask questions, but they were powerless. Who would believe a poor farmer over the word of a powerful countess? The disappearances were explained away. The girl ran off. She was sent to another estate. She fell ill. The excuses were endless, and there was nothing anyone could do. Inside the castle, Elizabeth and her accomplices allegedly turned the dungeons into a personal laboratory of pain. The accounts from her later trial paint a terrifying picture. Girls were subjected to unspeakable acts. They were beaten for days, stuck with needles, or left outside in the freezing winter, where water was poured on them until they became living statues of ice. The legend of the bloodbath grew from these horrors. While historians debate whether she literally bathed in blood, the testimony of over 300 witnesses described her obsession with it. They spoke of rituals where victims were led to a tub so the countess could cover her face and body in their vitality, believing it would preserve her legendary beauty. For nearly a decade, this reign of terror continued, hidden away in the remote castle. The number of victims grew from dozens to, some claimed, over 600. Elizabeth kept a meticulous list of her victims in a diary, a detail that, if true, speaks to a chilling level of detachment and pride in her work. But her vanity would become her downfall. As the years went on, she grew bolder and more desperate. The blood of peasant girls, she supposedly believed, was no longer potent enough. She needed purer blood, the blood of the nobility. This was a fatal mistake. Elizabeth established what she called a gymnasium, a sort of finishing school for the daughters of lesser nobles. Families sent their girls to Čachtice Castle to learn courtly etiquette from the sophisticated Countess Bathory. It was a great honor, but these girls were not students. They were the next harvest. When the daughters of aristocrats started to disappear, the world finally began to listen. Unlike the peasants, these families had influence. They had connections. They could demand answers. The rumors that had been swirling for years finally reached the ears of the king himself, King Matthias II of Hungary. The king had a serious problem. Elizabeth Bathory was not just a powerful noble. The crown owed her a massive amount of money. To put her on public trial would be a huge scandal for the nobility and could expose the king's own financial debts. But the disappearances of noble girls could no longer be ignored. He turned to one man to solve the problem, György Thurzó, the Palatine of Hungary. He was the highest-ranking official in the country after the king, and perhaps more importantly, he was Elizabeth's own cousin. Thurzó was tasked with investigating the rumors surrounding Čachtice Castle. In December of 1610, Thurzó and a group of soldiers made their way to the castle. They arrived unannounced, late at night. The official accounts, written by Thurzó himself, describe a scene straight from a nightmare. As they stormed the castle, they found one girl lifeless in the main hall and another who was still alive but bore the marks of terrible punishment. In the dungeons below, they found several other girls, locked away, some of them barely clinging to life.
The evidence was overwhelming. Elizabeth Báthory was immediately placed under house arrest. Her accomplices, the inner circle who had helped her for years, were rounded up and put on trial. The trial that followed was swift and brutal. The servants, likely under severe duress, confessed to everything. They recounted years of horrific acts, describing in detail how they helped their mistress lure, confine, and ultimately end the lives of countless young women. Their testimonies sealed their own fates. 2 of them had their fingers ripped off before being thrown into a fire. The others were executed. But what about the Countess herself, the main architect of all this horror? Elizabeth Báthory never stood trial. Her noble name, the very thing that gave her the power to commit her crimes, was also what saved her from a public execution. To execute a Bathory would be an unthinkable stain on the aristocracy. So they devised a different punishment, one that was perhaps even more cruel. By order of her cousin, Georgi Thurzel, Elizabeth was sentenced to a life of solitary confinement within the very castle where she had committed her atrocities. They took her to a set of rooms in Čachtice Castle and walled them up. All the windows and doors were sealed with brick and mortar, leaving only a small slot for food and water to be passed through.
The Countess, who had been obsessed with her own image, with beauty and power, was now condemned to spend the rest of her days in total darkness and isolation. A prisoner in her own home, left alone with nothing but the ghosts of her past and the memory of her crimes. For 4 years, she remained in that stone tomb. Then, in August of 1614, a guard noticed that her food had gone untouched. When they broke down the wall, they found Elizabeth Báthory, the once feared Blood Countess, lying lifeless on the floor. She had died, alone, in the dark. For centuries, this has been the story, the tale of a monstrous, vampire-like queen who slaughtered hundreds to stay young. But in modern times, a different perspective has emerged. Some historians now question the official narrative. They ask, was Elizabeth Báthory truly the most prolific female serial killer in history? Or was she the victim of an elaborate political conspiracy? Consider this. Elizabeth was an incredibly wealthy and independent Protestant widow in a kingdom dominated by Catholic men who were vying her power. King Matthias owed her a fortune. Her cousin, Thurzo, who led the investigation, also had his eyes on her vast lands. Was it possible that the charges against her were exaggerated or even fabricated to remove her from the picture and seize her wealth and property? The evidence against her comes almost entirely from the testimony of her servants, who confessed under threat of extreme punishment, and from the accounts of her political rivals. She was never allowed to speak in her own defense. So what is the truth? Was she a sadistic monster who got what she deserved, or a powerful woman who was framed by the men who feared her? The reality is likely lost to time, somewhere in the murky shadows between history and legend. The historical evidence points to a woman who was undeniably cruel, a ruthless aristocrat who certainly abused and likely killed many of her servants. But the more lurid tales, the bathing in blood, the diary of victims, these may be the embellishments that transformed a brutal noblewoman into an immortal monster of folklore. In the end, it is the legend that endures, The chilling story of the Blood Countess, a woman so consumed by vanity that she sought to steal youth from others, serves as a dark and timeless warning about the depths of human cruelty when absolute power is left unchecked. The truth of what happened in that castle may be buried, but the nightmare of Elizabeth Bathory lives on, forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more Untold history.